Hello and welcome. The title sequence features a version of the 1987 RUF CTR Yellowbird, included with the driving simulator Assetto Corsa, and driving at Laguna Seca in Monterey County, California. I added a livery I downloaded allowing the RUF to look something like a Magnus Walker Porsche 911. And as I'm discussing Porsche through the medium of video games, the RUF is relevant, since it was for a long time the closest thing to a Porsche 911 officially available in video games until the exclusive rights owned by Electronic Arts came to an end. So why this video, and what do I mean by a letter to Magnus Walker? A while ago I came across Magnus and his story, which is both fascinating and inspirational. For those who are not aware of Magnus, I'll include some links below in the description. And in relation to my Porsche passion, this is a term Magnus has referred to, and this passion I too share, but in a different way. Magnus is a Porsche car collector who restores and modifies Porsches, adding his own unique design cues. I myself don't own a Porsche. I've never actually sat in a Porsche, much less driven one. Not unless you consider being inside a Porsche in a virtual environment a valid example, but more on this later. While I was putting together some ideas for this piece, I remembered that when I was young I had a large die-cast Porsche 911 toy, with a German police car livery I think, something like the one in this image with the Fuchs rims, which I hope I'm pronouncing correctly. I don't have the toy anymore. I do have a Porsche collection though, well, sort of. Nowadays, with video games and the internet, you can learn so much more about so many different things. I've gone from knowing only the basics about cars and motorsport to learning so much more about the topic, and in this case about Porsche and the Porsche 911, which leads me to Magnus and the reason behind this video. You see, I'd been planning to create something about Magnus since I first came across his story. I'd been dwelling on the idea for a while, until I came up with some ideas for the story I wanted to try and tell. In an interview, Magnus spoke about letter writing and how it's still relevant, and how in his case his passion for Porsche began with a letter he wrote to Porsche when he was just 10 years old, after he'd seen a Porsche at the Earl's Court Motor Show in London in 1977. Rather than write a letter or send an email, I wanted to try and communicate my own unique perspective through the medium I used to fuel a similar Porsche passion of sorts, no pun intended. And Magnus, should you ever be watching this, I do hope I'm able in some way to get the message across. Magnus has spoken about going with your gut feeling and finding inner peace and making yourself happy. And one element of that is, I guess, by doing the things you're passionate about. So on that note, let's continue. I've put together a collection of Porsche 911s I have, which we'll first take a quick look at and then go for a quick, albeit virtual drive in each one of them. A form of ticking some items off my virtual bucket list, if you will. Drive a Porsche and attend a Rennsport event like the one occurring in September this year, 2018. Although it's not a 911, we'll also include the 1948 Porsche 356. The 356 is relevant since the 911 was the evolution of the 356, which itself was an evolution of the original Volkswagen Beetle. And then the Porsche 901 from 1964, where the Porsche 911 story begins, and some 911s up until the present day. So a sort of 911 focused virtual Rennsport event, if you will. As you can see, the instantly recognizable iconic shape continues. For some reason I'm drawn to the 911 design. If I'm ever watching a racing event, I look out for the Porsches, in this example the 911 RSR, the LeMans Endurance Racing Class car. And like the 356, we'll finish by also including the front-engined 944, as it's also very relevant to the story of the 911. So we're starting our first event at Laguna Seca, and we're in the Porsche 356 from 1948. what is considered to be the first production Porsche. Rear engine, rear wheel drive, air cooled, 4 cylinders and about 60 brake horsepower or so. And I've just noticed the ignition on the starter is on the right, whereas in a 911 or in a Porsche in general it's on the left. Minor thing, I suppose. This car designed by Ferry Ferdinand Porsche, whereas Ferdinand Senior had designed the Volkswagen Beetle. You might notice I'm not including a virtual driver. I don't see the need to, as I don't wish to cover up the interior of the car. As we climb the hill to come down the corkscrew. Which I believe is like a 7-story descent, which is hard to appreciate in this medium, shall I say, but of course you get the idea. And the 356 is kind of poignant right now because Porsche are celebrating 70 years of producing sports cars, so that's cool. It's a lovely old thing. Now I think on to the 901. So we're now in the 1964 Porsche 901 and we're taking a spin at Le Mans. Magnus had spoken about visiting Le Mans for one of the 24-hour events, so I thought it might be nice to include it. And also, since Le Mans is important to the story of Porsche, in my case, these are leisurely drives because if I try and go too fast, oversteer will take over, especially in these rear engine, rear wheel drive machines, or I'll get punted. Take your pick. Not to worry. At least I have my old buddy, the 356, to keep me company. And 5 gears too. 5-gear manual, that's interesting. So the 901 was launched at the Frankfurt Motor Show in 1963, and I believe later at the Paris Motor Show, Peugeot informed that they had been using the 0 prefix in their naming convention, so the 901 had to become the 911 or 911. And so, as Magnus has pointed out, began the story of the 911. And of course, the reveal of the 901 caused the stir. I have two versions of this car, 128 and 165 brake horsepower, and this is the latter version with a Carrera RS engine, 2.7 litres. The only trouble is with these lovely old Porsches, I could stay in them all day, even if it's just in a video game. But I do have other marks to discuss. So we're now at Daytona, and we're in the 1972 Porsche 911 Carrera RSR. Again, rear engined, 3 litre, 6 cylinders, and about 330 brake horsepower. And this car based on homologation of the Carrera RS, and which apparently won the 24-hour event here in Daytona in 1973, and also competed in the last Targa Florio. Again, another fun car to drive. This banking turn must be a frightening prospect in real life. Onto the so-called bus stop at Daytona. The term, I think, came from a commentator who once referred to it as something like a bus stop. I told you I'd get myself into trouble. I'm missing gears as well. Maybe it's safe enough, or safer, to stop now. So on we go. So we're now in the 1978 Porsche 930 911 Turbo. And we're racing at Sebring. Magnus had mentioned visiting Miami, I think it was, so I thought we could try and utilize Sebring. 3.3 litre engine producing about 300 brake horsepower. 4-speed manual shifter with brakes from the Racing 917. An adjustable boost, even in the video game. And since we're on the topic of 1978, we could mention Magnus and his dad taking a trip from Sheffield to London on a bus to visit the Earl's Court Motor Show, where Magnus saw the white Martini livery Porsche with red and blue stripe, and thus the Porsche Passion began. So he writes them a letter at the age of 10 to Porsche in Zuffenhausen, Stuttgart, and tells them he wants to design for them. They say come back when you're older, which he actually did, so there you go. I won't blame my appalling driving on the turbo lag. If anybody's lagging right now, it's me. So we're back at Laguna Seca. And we're in the 1986 Porsche 944 Turbo S, which, to be honest, I wasn't sure where to place, but since we're going chronologically, I decided to include it now. Front engined, around 250 brake horsepower, and inspired by the racing version of the earlier 924, the Carrera GT. I believe Magnus is also collecting front engine Porsches now as well. And of course the front engine 924, 928, the 944 and the 968 were very important to Porsche at one point, since they wondered should they continue with just front engine. They needed some cars that would sell more, so I believe the front engine models kept them going for quite a while. And if you look at the reviews of the front engine models on YouTube, they're largely positive, I would say. And again, front engine, rear engine would stay in this all day. Therein lies the problem. But we do have more to cover, so on we go. So we're now at Daytona in the 1987 Porsche 959. The Group B concept car that would inspire the future of the 911. Permission had been given inside Porsche to produce the car. And of course, Group B at the time wasn't just for rally. First shown at the Frankfurt Motor Show in 1983. 440 brake horsepower from a 2.85 litre flat six with twin turbos. And the turbo arrangement was set up so as to reduce the turbo lag, making it effectively a thing of the past. Of course, 2.85 litres is slightly smaller than you would expect, but that was to meet with the regulations. All-wheel drive and computer controlled suspension. So, one of the most technologically advanced cars of its time, if not of all time, some would say. And of course, this was the era of the front engine cars like the 944 we just covered, but people were still buying the 911. So hence the reason to conceptualize what the 911 could become. And as I said, first announced at Frankfurt in 1983, but not in production or not released from production until April of 1987, at which point the Group B era was already over. And the car cost a lot more to produce than they sold it for, so they effectively lost a small fortune on this car. So it's now a museum piece mostly, I gather. It's a very nice car to drive, and adjustable boost inside the simulation as well. Actually, while we're on the era, or while we're on the topic of the 1980s, there was a nice story that Magnus told of as part of the film location business he and his wife had gotten into. At one point, Eddie Van Halen was sitting in Magnus's kitchen, and he picked up Magnus's guitar and started to play it. And there had been a music festival in the UK in 1984, which I think Magnus had attended, and at which Van Halen appeared, and I think he asked Eddie to sign a copy of the program, from the festival. And then at one point, as you would, Magnus was thinking, I'm sitting in my kitchen with Eddie Van Halen playing my guitar. How did I get here? Sometimes life is like that, I suppose. The only problem is one could start in the 959 and just stay in it for the rest of the day. We can't do that. We have to finish at some point. So we're now at LeMans in the 1993 Porsche 911 993 Turbo S. .993, I believe, being a reference to the internal name for the 911 at the time, sold between 1993 and 1998. .420 brake horsepower from a twin turbo flat 6. Or at least around 420. And one of the last air-cooled 911s. Something like this must be worth a pretty penny, I would imagine. The old 356 holding its own. This thing is proving a bit of a challenge. It seems to want to go everywhere it shouldn't and go there sideways. 6-speed manual shift, and I noticed as well a little Porsche logo on the shifter, which is nice. Nice little detail. Now we're talking about 1993. I made note of the fact that Magnus has pointed out he bought his first Porsche in 1992. Oh-ho. A 1974 wide-bodied slant nose conversion. I don't have a version of one of those, but you can look them up online. I meant about this thing wanting to go sideways. Oh, there's some damage. I wouldn't like to know how much that would cost in the real world. Maybe cars like this aren't even driven anymore. Showpieces to be polished, perhaps. It's definitely not what they were designed for. That's for sure. it's time to move on. Indianapolis at LeMans is always tricky. It's almost like it's going to kick out at any moment. Almost like it it wants to do that. That's just the nature of it. Like one of those drifting video thingies. So we've now moved ahead about 20 years or so, and we're in the 2015 Porsche 911 Carrera S, taking another drive at Sebring. Very nice red exterior with red accents on the interior. 420 brake horsepower from a turbo flat 6. And this model featuring the Porsche Sport Chrono package, as well as a PDK transmission, effectively an automatic transmission. PDK being Porsche Doppelkupplungsgetriebe. My German isn't great. A double or dual clutch transmission, which, if I understand correctly, means two gearboxes where one gearbox is using the current gear selected and the second is anticipating the next change, of course making things more efficient, and which was developed from motor racing. The first 911 to feature PDK was, I believe, in 2009. And another technical detail, if I understand correctly, there are 7 gears in this transmission, where the 7th gear is used for efficiency. So when you're driving the car, it will, as quickly as possible, go to the 7th gear, whereas technically the highest gear is the 6th in terms of speed. 6th would be overdrive, I suppose, and 7th is the efficient gear. I can of course change to 7th gear in this simulation, but the automatic switching to 7th gear isn't simulated in this case, or at least not that I'm aware. So a daily driver and a sports car all in one. Drive to work on a Monday, drive on a Sunday at the track. Porsche ethos from the outset, I guess, for the last 70 years or so. Oh, good brakes anyway. "20 years in the future, I'm still trying to finish." Like I said, I tend to get stuck in one and don't want to leave it. Chris Harris style, drifting around. So we're back at Laguna Seca, and this time in the 2016 Porsche 911R, a 991 911, and which is significant because only 991 of these were manufactured. Sort of a limited run collector's edition, I suppose, and I believe this has become a collector's edition. In other words, it has increased in value and become sort of a showroom piece, not something you would drive if you had invested in one. Sort of the 911 GT3 but without the rear wing, and indeed the chassis is similar to that of the GT3. This also includes rear wheel steering and a 6-speed sport manual transmission. The engine is a large volume 6-cylinder flat 6. .500 brake horsepower, 4 litres, and naturally aspirated, so no turbo this time. A very interesting vehicle and a beautiful driver's car, I'm sure. The simulation even comes close to what it is actually like. Well, it's definitely something that will be included in a game, it being the unobtainable, shall we say. Price and availability being, of course, large factor. Give our GT3 brethren a run for their money. Money being the operative word in this case. This must be something else at Laguna Seca for real. Track day to remember, no doubt. Not even close to the wall, so don't worry. The investment is safe, even in my hands. So we're back in Daytona, and this time in the 2016 Porsche 911 GT3R, the racing version of the GT3 platform. 500 brake horsepower from a 4-litre flat 6. I guess the 911 on our left that we just covered is the street version of this car in a way, or at least they share DNA, of course without the wing in the case of the 911R. And the blue vertical lights on the sides of the LCD display indicating traction loss. Catch me if you can. This is something to chuck around, as they say. Must be worth, I guess, €500,000 and some change, or something like that. I don't know. Definitely something else. I think I better stop, lest I get carried away. So we're back at Le Mans, and this time in the 2016 Porsche 911 GT3 RS. The ultimate in road legal Porsche racing, I suppose. In that case, don't do anything illegal on a public road. Four-litre, 500 brake horsepower, flat 6, and the most output out of any naturally aspirated engine, or so I believe. I believe Joe Rogan has one of these. Joe Rogan, the podcaster. Also a special PDK dual clutch transmission. Indeed, RS doesn't come with manual, PDK only, as far as I know. And the widest tyres of any 911 as well, I believe, for the most mechanical grip, I suppose. real poster boy, this one. And seven speeds. Careful not to lock up the rear wheels. Downshift protection implemented in the game. You can turn it off as well, I believe. Something to take to the Nürburgring, I guess, if you had one. You happen to live in Europe. I should be so lucky. A slide there. Immense fun though. You can't go wrong. So once again at Sebring, and this time in the 2017 Porsche 911 Turbo S. A 3.8 litre twin turbo flat six, producing about 580 brake horsepower. And a PDK transmission. Bit of a fight there, even amongst us gentlemen drivers. Uh-huh. Oh well. Better luck next time. Somebody's getting a ticket. Okay, so we're back at Laguna Seca, and this time in a variant of the 911 GT3, 2017 911 GT3 Touring package. So I guess related to the GT3 and the 911R. 4-litre naturally aspirated engine with manual transmission. So performance with less, I guess the performance is less obvious from the external view. Without the rear wing and the relevant styling. Hidden potential, I suppose you could say. A true all-rounder, perhaps. Real mean machine. My apologies to whoever owns those traffic cones. Sorry, officer, I didn't mean it. It's probably safer if I stop her now. So we're now at Daytona in the 2017 Porsche 911 GT3 Cup car. A 4-litre flat 6 with direct fuel injection producing 485 brake horsepower. This is apparently the most produced and most sold GT racing car in the world, and is manufactured on the same line as the 911 at Zuffenhausen in Stuttgart. And of course competes in many events, Porsche Super Cup and the Carrera Cups. very nice car to drive. It's very responsive, at least as far as I can tell. This is only a simulation after all. Six-speed PDK, as you would expect. And again, I could stay in this one all day. Must be something else in reality. So we're back at Le Mans, and this time in the 2017 Porsche 911 RSR. The GT Le Mans class car, competing in the FIA World Endurance Championship and the IMSA 12 and 24-hour races. Ultra modern 4-litre flat 6 producing 510 brake horsepower, and one notable difference being the engine placed in front of the rear axle, so as close to mid-engine as possible, I guess you could say. Hence the rear view camera, because basically there's no way to see out. And similar to the Cup car, 6-speed sequential. And the sound of the naturally aspirated motors different than anything else and instantly recognizable. So it's fitting that we're taking a spin at Le Mans. And of course, this is Porsche's major competitor at Le Mans, given the fact that they've pulled out of the LMP1 class. Yeah. GT3 RS is not happy. As you can see, there's a view from the rear of the cup car, but not from this one. It's the different engine arrangement. Oh. And excellent brakes, of course, as well. Like all the Porsches, even back to the good old 356, you could stay in them all day and just potter around, even if it's only a simulation. We'll cut across to the pits. For our final event, we're at Sebring, and this time in the Porsche 911 GT2 RS, a 991.2 911 to be exact. A 3.8 litre motor, similar to that in the 911 Turbo S we covered earlier, producing 690 brake horsepower with a custom 7-speed GT PDK transmission. And also rear wheel steering. And this, I believe, is also a limited edition, but limited run like the 911R. And also PDK only, if I'm correct. Need to take it easy in this one because if I reach too far it will bite back, it seems. Trying to tame the beast, so to speak. Just like I said. Oops. What did I just do? Oh dear. Oops. Just like at Disneyland. Well, it is in Florida, so you don't have to go too far. But like I said, go too far and it will bite. If you've managed to reach this point in the video and you're still awake, I hope you've enjoyed a look into my, dare I say, unique Porsche Passion. In the introduction I noted that I didn't have a Porsche of my own. While I was in the process of putting together this video, I managed to find one. Well, not exactly. It is Magnus's Porsche though, and similar to the one I included in the introduction. Although my kids don't understand why it is I don't wish to remove it from the packaging. I'd like to thank Magnus for inspiring me in a way to create this video and for sharing all his thoughts and ideas, and of course his Porsche collection. If you've enjoyed this video, I'd appreciate a like and a subscribe, and if you have any questions or comments, please include them below. Thank you.